Atlantis was real, and it was more advanced than us. At least, that is what countless fragments of myth, mysterious ruins, and baffling pieces of evidence seem to whisper through the ages. But what if this isn't just a romantic tale of a sunken paradise? What if the greatest civilization in human history wasn't waiting for us in the future, but was buried deep in the past? What if Atlantis was never a myth at all, but a forgotten reality, a world so advanced that even today, thousands of years later, we struggle to match its achievements? We live in a time where technology defines our identity. Satellites circle the planet, supercomputers predict the weather, and artificial intelligence shapes the way we think. Yet, what if these accomplishments are only echoes, shadows, of something far greater that once existed? Could it be that our proud modern world is merely rediscovering what an ancient society already mastered long before the first recorded empires of Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Greece? Plato's writings hinted at such a place, describing temples glistening with orichalcum, canals engineered with impossible precision, and an empire so powerful it shook the known world. But were his words allegory, or coded memory of something his ancestors knew to be true? Why do we find ancient maps charting coastlines long before modern instruments existed? Why do megaliths across continents reveal engineering secrets beyond our grasp? Why do so many cultures tell the same story of a lost golden age swallowed by water? Perhaps the myth of Atlantis endures not because it was a dream, but because it was real. And perhaps the reason it feels so familiar is because we are not advancing toward the pinnacle of civilization, we are climbing back toward it. The story of Atlantis begins not in myth, but in philosophy. Around 360 BCE, the great Greek thinker Plato wrote two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. These works are often grouped together as speculative philosophy, but within them lies one of history's most tantalizing mysteries. Unlike his other dialogues, which usually revolved around abstract ideas of justice, governance, or metaphysics, here Plato introduced something startling, a detailed description of a lost civilization called Atlantis. What makes this so remarkable is that Plato did not present Atlantis as a metaphor or a parable. He described it as history. He attributed the story not to imagination, but to an account passed down from Egyptian priests to Solon, one of Athens' most respected statesmen, who in turn relayed it to his descendants. For Plato, Atlantis was not allegory, it was memory. This distinction is crucial. Plato frequently used myth to illustrate his philosophical points, but he always signaled when he was employing metaphor. The allegory of the cave, for example, was clearly symbolic. Atlantis, however, was framed as a factual retelling of events that had occurred 9,000 years earlier. To dismiss it as pure invention would require us to believe Plato broke with his own intellectual rigor, inventing not just a simple story, but an entire world with elaborate geography, architecture, politics, religion, and history. Why would a philosopher so devoted to reason go to such extraordinary lengths for a fiction he never called fiction? That question alone is why Atlantis refuses to vanish into myth. The Greeks themselves were no strangers to tales of lost civilizations. Their own mythology was filled with golden ages, with stories of great floods, and with reminders that humanity rises and falls in cycles. Hesiod, centuries before Plato, had written of the ages of man, gold, silver, bronze, and iron, each a decline from a prior perfection. The notion that a great civilization could exist and then be destroyed was not foreign to the Greek mind. It was woven into their worldview. What made Atlantis different was how grounded it seemed, how specific the description was, and how deliberately Plato stressed its authenticity. He claimed that Egypt's priests preserved records far older than Greek traditions, and that it was from this ancient source that the tale of Atlantis had been safeguarded. Plato described Atlantis in vivid detail. It was an island empire larger than Libya and Asia combined, situated beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the ancient term for the Strait of Gibraltar, where the Mediterranean meets the Atlantic Ocean. This alone suggests a striking possibility. Atlantis was not imagined as some small, fantastical isle, but as a continent-spanning power. The Atlanteans were said to control lands as far as Europe and Africa, extending their dominance across seas with a naval force unparalleled in the known world. Their capital was constructed with a design that modern urban planners might envy: concentric rings of land and water, perfectly engineered canals, grand temples, and palaces shimmering with rare metals. Among these metals was orichalcum, a mysterious alloy second only to gold in value, its name meaning mountain copper, but its true composition still debated by scholars. The society Plato described was both advanced and hierarchical. At its head was a dynasty descended from Poseidon himself, the god of the sea, and a mortal woman. 10 kings ruled the island, bound together by laws inscribed on a column of orichalcum in the temple of Poseidon. The Atlanteans enjoyed abundance, for their land was rich in resources: metals, timber, fertile plains, and abundant wildlife. Their engineers built bridges, tunnels, and docks with a sophistication that seemed centuries ahead of its time. Their armies and navies were immense, capable of projecting power across continents. And yet, despite this wealth and power, Plato emphasized that Atlantis was not immune to corruption. The downfall of Atlantis was moral before it was physical. In the beginning, the Atlanteans lived virtuously, guided by divine inheritance and wisdom. But over time, they succumbed to greed and ambition. Their leaders, once noble, became arrogant, seeking conquest and domination rather than harmony. They turned their gaze upon Athens, the rising power of Greece, intending to subjugate it as they had done with so many others. Here, Plato inserts a patriotic note. The Athenians, despite being outmatched, resisted the Atlanteans and triumphed through courage and virtue. It was shortly after this that catastrophe struck. The gods, displeased with Atlantis' corruption, unleashed destruction. In a single day and night of misfortune, earthquakes and floods swallowed the island whole, leaving behind only myth and memory. What is striking is how this pattern mirrors countless flood myths around the world. The Greeks were familiar with their own story of Deucalion, who survived a great deluge, just as Mesopotamian legend speaks of Utnapishtim and the biblical tradition tells of Noah. The destruction of Atlantis resonates with a universal archetype: the world cleansed by water, civilizations swept away, humanity forced to begin anew. But Plato's account is unique in that it ties this mythic theme to specific geography, to political systems, to metals, and to architecture. It does not read like a fable, but like a chronicle. Skeptics argue that Plato invented Atlantis to serve as a cautionary tale about hubris, a narrative designed to highlight the virtue of Athens. Yet, if his intention was purely allegorical, why root it so firmly in Egyptian tradition? Why offer so many painstaking details about measurements, distances, and materials? And why did later writers, from Plutarch to Proclus, continue to treat Atlantis as a serious topic for debate rather than dismissing it as mere storytelling? The possibility remains that Plato recorded what he sincerely believed to be a historical truth, one passed down across centuries and cultures. The Greek view of history was not linear but cyclical. Civilizations rose, flourished, and fell, often in catastrophic fashion. To Plato's audience, the idea that a mighty power once existed only to vanish beneath the sea was not absurd. It was entirely plausible. The seas themselves, ever-changing, were reminders of how fragile human achievement could be. Islands could rise or sink, coastlines could shift, and what seemed eternal could vanish within a generation. The notion that Egypt's priests preserved knowledge of such an event lent the story even greater weight, for Egypt's antiquity was legendary even to the Greeks. If the tale of Atlantis was rooted in Egyptian memory, it might have been far older than any Hellenic myth, reaching back into a time when history itself was hardly distinguishable from legend. To modern ears, Atlantis may sound like a fantastical utopia. But the careful construction of Plato's narrative suggests more than fantasy. He described the island's dimensions, its placement beyond the Mediterranean, its resources, its political system, and even its downfall in language that suggests report rather than invention. This is what continues to trouble historians and archaeologists. Why would Plato create such a comprehensive account and then insist it was true? Could it be that he was preserving fragments of a real memory, something dimly remembered, perhaps distorted, but not entirely false? The fascination with Atlantis persists precisely because of this ambiguity. If it were clearly allegory, it would have faded into the background of Plato's works, remembered only by scholars of philosophy. Instead, it has endured for over 2 millennia, inspiring explorers, scientists, mystics, and writers. The very persistence of the legend suggests that it taps into something deeper, a suspicion that history may hold secrets we have not yet uncovered, that what we call progress might not be as linear as we imagine. And so, from Plato's dialogues, the story of Atlantis begins its journey across cultures and centuries, a tale both historical and mythological, both precise and elusive. But legends alone do not convince. To take Atlantis seriously, one must look beyond philosophy into archaeology, geology, and the remnants of forgotten civilizations. The question becomes, is there evidence, however faint, that Plato's account was more than imagination? Can we find traces of a real Atlantis in the ruins, maps, and anomalies scattered across the world? If Plato's account of Atlantis was an isolated tale, it might be easy to dismiss as the invention of a single philosopher. Yet the deeper one looks into the world's oldest traditions, the more one realizes that the story of a lost civilization destroyed by water is not unique at all. It echoes across continents and cultures, preserved in myths that predate recorded history. Wherever humanity settled, from Mesopotamia to the Americas, from the Indian subcontinent to the Pacific Islands, stories were told of a golden age shattered by catastrophe, a world drowned beneath floods that swept away entire cities. The parallels are so striking that they suggest not mere coincidence, but a memory deeply ingrained in the human story. The Sumerians, among the first peoples to build cities and write down their history, left behind one of the most famous flood myths in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In this ancient poem, which predates the Hebrew Bible by centuries, the hero Gilgamesh encounters Utnapishtim, a man granted immortality after surviving a great deluge. Utnapishtim recounts how the gods, angered by humanity, decided to wipe out civilization with a flood. He was instructed to build a massive boat, gather his family and animals, and ride out the storm. When the waters receded, his vessel came to rest on a mountain, and life began anew. To the people of Mesopotamia, this was no simple fable. It was a story about origins, about why their civilization existed in the first place, and about the fragility of human power in the face of cosmic forces. What is intriguing is how closely this narrative resembles flood stories from distant lands. In India, the ancient text known as the Satapatha Brahmana tells of Manu, the first man, who was warned by a great fish of a coming flood. The fish instructed him to build a boat and tie it to the creature's horn, ensuring his survival as the waters engulfed the earth. After the deluge, Manu performed sacrifices, and from his offerings, new life emerged. Just as in Mesopotamia, the Indian tradition portrays a flood that wiped away a prior world, leaving behind only fragments of the past to seed a new humanity. These are not simple stories about rainstorms or seasonal flooding. They are myths of cataclysm. They describe waters rising with unstoppable force, swallowing not just villages but entire civilizations. They speak of a before and an after, of an age that ended violently and a new one that began in its shadow. The resonance with Plato's Atlantis is undeniable, a great civilization, wealthy and advanced, undone by its own hubris and consumed by the sea. Even across the oceans, among the indigenous peoples of the Americas, similar tales abound. The Hopi of North America speak of previous worlds destroyed by fire and flood, with survivors guided by spiritual beings into new ages of existence. In Central America, the Aztec and Maya traditions describe cycles of creation and destruction, with floods sweeping away prior humanity. In South America, the Inca told of a great deluge sent by Viracocha, their creator god, which wiped away the giants who once roamed the earth. Survivors took refuge in caves or high mountains until the waters receded. These accounts, though diverse in detail, all share the same essential structure. Humanity, or a prior civilization, was nearly annihilated by water, with only a handful surviving to carry forward knowledge into a new age. Skeptics often claim that such myths simply reflect the universal human experience of floods, since rivers overflow and storms batter coasts everywhere. But this explanation overlooks the scale and consistency of the stories. They do not describe local disasters. They describe global ones. They are not tales of a town washed away, but of entire worlds vanishing beneath water. More importantly, they share symbolic motifs that bind them together. Divine displeasure, warnings to a chosen few, the building of vessels, the preservation of knowledge or seed, and the rebirth of civilization afterward. One must ask, is it truly coincidence that people separated by oceans and millennia would all preserve the same theme? Or is there something older, something universal, that they all remembered? Plato's Atlantis fits neatly into this global pattern. His description of a vast island empire drowned in a single day and night echoes the same cataclysmic rhythm. If flood myths are fragments of cultural memory, Atlantis may have been one of those fragments, preserved in detail by the Greeks but known in spirit by all humanity. Archaeological discoveries over the last century have only deepened the mystery. Along ancient coastlines now submerged beneath the sea, divers have found ruins that suggest humanity once built cities in places now drowned. Off the coast of India, near the Gulf of Cumbot, sonar surveys revealed structures resembling walls, steps, and grids, submerged beneath 40 meters of water. In Japan, the Yonaguni Monument lies beneath the waves, with massive stone terraces and steps that some argue are natural formations, but others insist bear the marks of human design. In the Mediterranean, near Malta, megalithic temples align with the stars, their builders long forgotten, while strange anomalies lie buried under the sea near Cyprus and Greece. These discoveries hint that rising seas did indeed swallow places where people once lived. At the end of the last ice age, around 12,000 years ago, global sea levels rose dramatically as glaciers melted, inundating coastlines and reshaping the world. Vast stretches of habitable land vanished beneath the oceans, forcing human communities to retreat inland. If advanced settlements existed in those drowned lands, their remains would now lie hidden beneath hundreds of feet of water. To the survivors, watching their world vanish in floods and quakes, the memory would have been etched deeply into story and myth. Could these be the very origins of the flood legends we inherit today? What is especially compelling is how the timelines align. Plato placed the destruction of Atlantis at around 9,000 years before Solon, which would situate it roughly 11,600 years before our time, almost exactly when the Younger Dryas period ended, marking a sudden and violent shift in climate. This era saw massive glacial meltwater floods, abrupt temperature swings, and likely geological upheavals. The coincidence between Plato's chronology and geological evidence is difficult to ignore. If there ever was a real Atlantis, its destruction could have occurred during this precise window, when the world experienced one of its greatest known cataclysms. The idea of a shared memory becomes even more plausible when considering how oral traditions work. Myths are not literal histories, but they are vessels of memory, encoding essential truths in symbolic form. A people who lived through a global flood might not have preserved technical details of glacial melt or tectonic shifts, but they would have remembered the overwhelming waters, the loss of cities, and the need to begin again. They would tell their children, who would tell theirs, until the story became myth. By the time Plato recorded Atlantis, the tale had been filtered through thousands of years and countless retellings. But beneath the embellishments may lie the core truth, a civilization destroyed by water, remembered by all. In this sense, the myths of Sumer, India, the Americas, and countless other places are not simply folklore. They may be fragments of a shared human experience of catastrophe at the end of the Ice Age, when seas rose and worlds were drowned. If so, then Atlantis is not an anomaly, it is part of a global pattern. Its uniqueness lies only in the level of detail Plato recorded, not in the essence of the story itself. And so the question arises, if myth preserves memory, could archaeology preserve proof? Can the ruins beneath the sea, the mysterious megaliths, and the forgotten maps of ancient coastlines reveal more than just echoes of legend? To move from story to reality, we must follow the trail of stones, artifacts, and anomalies that suggest a chapter of human history has been lost beneath the waves. If myths are vessels of memory, then archaeology is the material record, the stones, artifacts, and ruins that allow us to test whether memory reflects reality. Stories alone may seduce the imagination, but when stories are mirrored by physical structures that defy conventional explanation, they demand deeper scrutiny. For centuries, mainstream history has insisted that complex civilizations arose only after 5,000 years ago, with Sumer, Egypt, and the Indus Valley marking the dawn of urban life. Yet scattered across the world are sites that challenge this timeline, structures so advanced, so deliberate, and so anomalous that they hint at an earlier, forgotten chapter of humanity. If Atlantis existed, one would expect its traces not in a single site, but in whispers, ruins half buried, artifacts half explained, alignments half understood. And indeed, such whispers exist. Perhaps the most astonishing of them all is Göbekli Tepe, located in modern-day Turkey. This site, first excavated in the 1990s, overturned everything scholars believed about early human civilization. Dated to at least 12,000 years ago, millennia before the invention of writing, agriculture, or cities, it consists of vast circular enclosures built from limestone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons. These pillars are carved with intricate reliefs of animals, abstract symbols, and humanoid forms. What is most confounding is not only the scale of the construction, but its sophistication. Hunter-gatherers, according to orthodox archaeology, should not have possessed the organizational ability, engineering skills, or social complexity required to build such a site. Yet Göbekli Tepe exists, demanding that we reconsider the assumption that civilization emerged suddenly around 3000 BCE. What does it mean that 12,000 years ago, at the very end of the Ice Age, people could quarry, transport, and arrange megaliths in deliberate astronomical alignments? Some researchers have suggested that Göbekli Tepe's enclosures are oriented toward particular stars or constellations, possibly used as a kind of ancient observatory. If true, then this was no primitive culture, but a sophisticated society with knowledge of astronomy and engineering beyond what history credits them with. The timing is tantalizing. Göbekli Tepe was built around the same period that Plato claimed Atlantis fell. Could it represent not the homeland itself, but a surviving outpost, a fragment of knowledge preserved after catastrophe? The pattern does not end there. Thousands of years after Göbekli Tepe, the Egyptians constructed the pyramids at Giza, structures so massive and precise that they remain among the greatest engineering feats in human history. The Great Pyramid of Khufu consists of over 2 million stone blocks, each weighing several tons, assembled with such accuracy that even modern construction equipment would struggle to replicate it. Its base is aligned almost perfectly with the cardinal points of the compass, deviating by only a fraction of a degree. The three pyramids together align with the belt of Orion, suggesting deliberate astronomical intent. Scholars argue about how Bronze Age builders achieved this, with theories ranging from ramps to levers to vast labor forces. Yet no conclusive method fully explains the precision, the scale, or the fact that the pyramid's proportions encode mathematical constants such as pi and the golden ratio. Why would a civilization barely emerging from the Neolithic period construct such monumental structures with cosmic alignments? And why does the pyramid complex seem to embody a level of knowledge not seen again for millennia? Some suggest that Egypt was not the true beginning of civilization, but the inheritor of knowledge from an earlier source. If a global cataclysm did wipe out an advanced culture at the end of the Ice Age, perhaps the survivors carried fragments of that lost knowledge to new lands, where it seeded the great monuments we still marvel at today. Similar mysteries can be found underwater, where rising seas have concealed vast portions of ancient human settlement. Off the coast of Japan lies the Yonaguni Monument, a massive stone formation beneath the waves. Discovered in the 1980s, it consists of terraces, steps, and flat surfaces that look uncannily like human architecture. Some geologists argue it is a natural formation, shaped by tectonic forces and erosion. Yet divers have documented right angles, sharp edges, and what appear to be carvings on the stone. If Yonaguni is artificial, it would date back at least 10,000 years, when the site was last above sea level. That would place it firmly within the window of Atlantis' supposed destruction. In India, off the coast of Gujarat, sonar scans in the Gulf of Kumbhat revealed geometric structures resembling streets, walls, and foundations beneath 40 meters of water. Artifacts recovered from the area were carbon dated to nearly 9,500 years ago, pushing the existence of organized settlements far earlier than conventional history allows. The city of Dwarka, long thought to be mythical from Hindu tradition, is said to have been swallowed by the sea, echoing the same theme. A great city, advanced for its time, lost beneath rising waters. The discovery of submerged ruins lends credence to the idea that ancient myths are not mere allegories, but encoded memories of real places. Across the world, in the Bahamas, lies the so-called Bimini Road, an underwater structure composed of massive stone blocks arranged in a linear formation. Discovered in 1968, it has been the subject of controversy ever since. Some argue it is a natural beach rock formation, fractured by geological processes. Others see deliberate design in the neatly laid blocks that resemble a road, pier, or seawall. The fact that it lies in the very region where Plato situated Atlantis, beyond the Pillars of Heracles, in the Atlantic Ocean, makes it even more tantalizing. Could this be a remnant of the lost empire, eroded and disguised by time, yet still faintly visible beneath the waves? What unites all these sites, Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids, Yonaguni, Dwarka, Bimini Road, is not simply their mystery, but their defiance of established timelines. Each suggests that human societies were capable of far more, far earlier, than conventional history accepts. Each carries the echo of a forgotten chapter, when knowledge and skill reached a height we have not fully understood. When viewed separately, they are anomalies. When viewed together, they sketch the outline of a lost world. And here lies the heart of the question. Are these ruins the remnants of Atlantis? Was there once a civilization, advanced in ways we still cannot replicate, spread across continents, connected by seafaring and knowledge, only to be drowned in the cataclysms at the end of the Ice Age? If so, then the traces of Atlantis may not be found in one grand discovery, but in the scattered ruins that continue to puzzle us, scattered like shards of a shattered memory. These remnants compel us to ask whether ancient people possessed advanced knowledge that modern science has long since forgotten. The alignment of monuments with stars, the precision of stone cutting, the apparent mapping of coastlines long before the invention of accurate navigation, all suggest a level of sophistication that cannot be easily explained. Could it be that what we call progress is in fact a rediscovery, a slow reassembly of knowledge once lost to catastrophe? If myths preserve memory and ruins preserve stone, then knowledge may preserve truth. The question becomes, how much did the ancients know, and how much of that knowledge has survived, hidden in plain sight within their architecture, their mathematics, and their astronomy? To seek Atlantis is not only to search the seas, but to search the ideas encoded within the works of those who may have inherited its legacy. If the scattered ruins of ancient civilizations suggest that humanity may have once been more advanced than history allows, then the question naturally arises: what technologies did these people possess? Plato's account of Atlantis is tantalizingly specific, offering hints of achievements so sophisticated that even modern engineers struggle to imagine them. While the dialogues focus on society, governance, and morality, they also reference feats of engineering that seem astonishing, particularly for a civilization supposedly existing over 11,000 years ago. Canals carved with precision, bridges spanning vast distances, and palaces arranged in concentric rings of land and water imply not only architectural skill, but an understanding of hydraulics, construction, and urban planning that rivals, or surpasses, our own. Beyond construction, myths surrounding Atlantis suggest energy sources that verge on the fantastic. Ancient legends speak of crystals used to generate power, shining with internal light and capable of extraordinary effects. Some accounts hint at devices that concentrated energy in ways we would recognize as electricity or radiation. While modern science might dismiss such tales as allegorical, the recurrence of crystal motifs across cultures invites speculation. Crystals are not just decorative. Their properties as conductors of energy and vibration are well documented. Could the Atlanteans have discovered principles of energy transfer far in advance of the technologies we struggle to perfect today? Speculation deepens when one considers the legends of devices that hovered or moved without apparent propulsion. Myths describe flying machines, floating platforms, and levitating cities, sustained by forces that defy gravity. While modern engineering relies on combustion, magnetism, and aerodynamics, Atlantean accounts suggest something entirely different: mastery over forces invisible to our eyes, perhaps through manipulation of electromagnetic or gravitational fields. In the absence of physical evidence, these descriptions might seem like fantasy, but they are remarkably consistent across multiple sources and retellings. The notion of anti-gravity, once dismissed as science fiction, has become a serious field of inquiry in modern physics. Could the ancients have stumbled upon discoveries that we are only now beginning to explore? Wireless energy, too, appears in accounts of Atlantis, echoing ideas that would only be articulated in the 19th and 20th centuries. Nikola Tesla, often regarded as the father of modern electrical engineering, dreamed of transmitting power across the globe without wires, using resonant frequencies and electromagnetic fields. The myths of Atlantis suggest that its people may have harnessed similar principles millennia earlier. Temples and palaces reportedly contained central sources of energy that powered lighting, machinery, and possibly even transportation, without the need for conventional fuel. If true, such knowledge would imply a civilization that not only understood energy, but had mastered its distribution in ways far beyond our current capacity. Comparisons to modern technology grow even more compelling when one considers other claimed abilities of the Atlanteans. Legends speak of tools capable of cutting stone with perfect precision, machines that could direct heat or light with astonishing focus, and devices that seem to generate force from concentrated energy. In modern terms, these descriptions suggest parallels to lasers, nuclear energy, and even satellite-based technology. Lasers, used for cutting and precision measurement, operate on focused beams of light, while nuclear reactions release immense energy from the atomic scale. Satellite technology allows for observation, communication, and energy transmission across the globe. Could Atlantis have possessed precursors to all of these? The idea seems extraordinary, yet the consistency of the myths invites serious consideration. Even the scale of Atlantean architecture hints at extraordinary technological capability. Plato describes massive bridges, enormous canals, and palaces adorned with metals and materials whose sourcing and transportation would challenge our modern equipment. The stones themselves, some enormous enough to require coordinated levitation or advanced machinery, suggest an understanding of forces and mechanics that we struggle to replicate today. Modern engineers marvel at ancient construction projects not merely for their beauty, but because the precision and scale often defy explanation using only simple tools or brute labor. If the Atlanteans achieved such feats, it implies mastery of materials, energy, and mechanics that may have surpassed the capabilities of contemporary civilization. Some theorists go further, proposing that the Atlanteans had a form of energy storage and distribution unknown to us. Descriptions of crystal matrices, glowing orbs, and other devices hint at a sophisticated understanding of physics and energy manipulation. Could they have converted natural forces, geothermal, electromagnetic, or otherwise, into usable power? Could entire cities have been illuminated and maintained by technologies now lost beneath millennia of destruction? If these ideas sound fantastical, consider that modern technology continues to pursue similar goals, from wireless power transfer to experimental levitation and magnetically supported structures. Atlantis, in legend, seems to anticipate these innovations thousands of years before their invention. The consistency of these technological hints across multiple sources adds weight to the speculation. Plato is not the only record. Various esoteric traditions, including Egyptian, Hindu, and Mesoamerican texts, reference advanced knowledge, crystal energy, and flying vehicles or floating platforms. Even if mythologized, the recurring motifs suggest that humanity once possessed an understanding of energy, mechanics, and materials that was subsequently lost. Could Atlantis have been a hub of such knowledge, preserved for a brief time and obliterated by catastrophe, leaving only fragments for later generations to puzzle over? The question of whether Atlantis could have surpassed modern technology is not merely academic. It challenges our assumptions about progress itself. We tend to see history as a linear march forward, from primitive to advanced, from simple to complex. Yet the archaeological and mythological evidence suggests a more cyclical pattern, civilizations rising to heights of understanding, only to be destroyed, forcing humanity to begin again. In that context, Atlantis represents a lost pinnacle, a civilization whose achievements we have yet to fully comprehend or replicate. Could the pyramids, Göbekli Tepe, Yonaguni, and Bimini Road all be remnants or echoes of this knowledge? Could the legends of flying machines, wireless power, and crystal energy be hints of technologies that once existed and might someday be rediscovered? Consider the implications. If Atlantis truly mastered energy, levitation, and engineering at a level beyond ours, the civilization may have been more advanced than our own in crucial ways. Modern society relies on combustion, electronics, and fossil fuels. It struggles with resource distribution, environmental degradation, and energy storage. Atlantis, according to legend, may have solved these problems millennia ago, creating sustainable cities, harnessing energy efficiently, and achieving feats of construction and transport that remain miraculous to this day. The idea is not merely a thought experiment. It forces us to reconsider what is possible when knowledge is preserved, applied, and transmitted without interruption. Even Plato's moral framing of Atlantis hints at the interplay between technology and ethics. The downfall of the Atlanteans was attributed to hubris and misuse of power, suggesting that advanced technology alone is insufficient to ensure a civilization's survival. Knowledge without wisdom, power without restraint, can lead to destruction, just as much as ignorance can lead to stagnation. In this sense, Atlantis serves both as inspiration and caution, a reminder that technological mastery must be paired with responsibility, or the results may vanish beneath the waves, leaving only myth. In imagining Atlantean technology, one also confronts the gap between evidence and speculation. While we lack concrete machines, devices, or writings detailing crystal energy or levitation, the archaeological record, myths, and the accounts of Plato provide tantalizing clues. Each stone structure, each submerged ruin, each tale of flying platforms or energy crystals is a fragment of a puzzle. The challenge is to interpret these fragments without dismissing them as mere fantasy, to explore the possibility that human potential once extended far beyond the limits we assume today. Finally, comparing Atlantean legends to our modern world highlights the enormity of the gap. Lasers, satellites, nuclear power, wireless communication. All these are feats humanity has achieved only within the last century. Yet Atlantis, according to myth, accomplished similar or even superior innovations thousands of years before recorded history. If even part of these accounts is true, the implications are staggering. A civilization that existed, flourished, and vanished, leaving behind a blueprint of knowledge we are only now rediscovering. Atlantis, in this view, is not just a story, but a challenge, a measure of human ingenuity, reminding us that the limits we perceive may be self-imposed, and that the past may hold secrets that redefine the present. If Atlantis left behind ruins, artifacts, and myths, it may also have left another form of evidence: maps. Maps are more than mere illustrations. They are records of knowledge, often encoding discoveries, coastlines, and topographical understanding that reflect the society that produced them. Some ancient maps are so detailed, so precise, that they continue to baffle historians and cartographers. Could it be that they preserve knowledge inherited from a civilization that existed long before the societies of Greece, Egypt, or medieval Europe? If Atlantis existed and thrived, it stands to reason that its knowledge of geography, navigation, and the world's continents may have been passed down, eventually influencing the maps that have survived to this day. Perhaps the most famous of these is the Piri Reis map, drawn in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis. What makes this map extraordinary is not simply its beauty or historical context, but the accuracy of certain details that appear to depict coastlines now hidden beneath ice or water. Most strikingly, the map seems to show the northern coast of Antarctica as it would appear free of ice, a coastline not fully discovered until modern times. The Piri Reis map also depicts the coastlines of South America and Africa with remarkable precision for the early 16th century, raising questions about the sources Piri Reis used. In his own notes, he claimed to have drawn upon older charts from diverse origins, some dating back centuries or even millennia. If these sources were real, they may represent fragments of Atlantean knowledge passed down through generations, encoded in maps that survived the centuries. The Piri Reis map is not an isolated curiosity. Other medieval and early Renaissance maps display surprising sophistication in their depiction of continents, islands, and coastlines. For example, the Orance Fine map of 1531 and the maps of Martin Waldseemüller Muller show surprisingly accurate representations of the Americas, often incorporating knowledge that would not have been possible through contemporary exploration alone. In some cases, features appear that suggest the cartographers had access to older, now lost data. Similarly, the Catalan Atlas of 1375 contains geographic and cultural information that would have required knowledge stretching far beyond what Europe possessed at the time. The recurring theme is that these maps hint at a source of knowledge older than the societies producing them, suggesting inheritance from an advanced civilization whose charts and measurements survived, even if its cities and technologies did not. It is worth noting that ancient seafaring cultures often kept meticulous records of navigation and geography. The Phoenicians, for instance, were renowned for their maritime expertise, traveling extensively across the Mediterranean and perhaps even beyond the Atlantic. Could they have inherited Atlantean knowledge and transmitted it through their own maps and oral tradition? Plato's account of Atlantis situates the island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, the Strait of Gibraltar, placing it within the reach of ancient seafarers. It is plausible, then, that survivors or travelers from Atlantis could have passed on their understanding of distant continents and coastlines, encoded in the maps that later civilizations preserved. The accuracy of some of these maps is striking when considered in the context of historical knowledge. For example, many show coastlines with contours, inlets, and islands that correspond to actual geography, despite being drawn centuries before accurate surveying techniques existed. In some cases, the latitude and longitude are astonishingly precise, suggesting knowledge of celestial navigation and measurement that seems improbable for the eras in which the maps were created. If these maps were based, even in part, on older charts, then those charts must have originated from a culture with both technical expertise and a global perspective, qualities Plato attributed to Atlantis. The implications of such inheritance are profound. Maps are not neutral. They are records of observation, experimentation, and calculation. If medieval or early modern maps reflect knowledge older than their own societies, they may represent one of the few surviving legacies of a lost civilization. Atlantis, according to Plato, was a hub of learning and technological mastery. Its engineers, scientists, and navigators would have had a deep understanding of geography, currents, and the Earth's contours. Even if the island itself was destroyed, the knowledge could have been preserved in written records, oral traditions, or charts, eventually influencing later cartographers. In this sense, the maps become more than tools for navigation. They are echoes of a civilization erased by time, yet surviving in fragments that we can still observe and analyze. Some researchers have gone further, suggesting that the advanced cartography evident in these maps points to knowledge of Earth's dimensions, the existence of continents not fully known, and even polar regions unknown to explorers of the era. The Piri-Reis map's depiction of Antarctica, in particular, has sparked debate because it shows land that would have been inaccessible due to ice and extreme climate. If the map is accurate, how could Piri-Reis have drawn it? His notes claim the use of older charts, some of which may have originated from lost civilizations or seafarers with ancient knowledge. The logical conclusion is that some source existed long before modern exploration, perhaps tracing back to the time of Atlantis or another advanced culture lost to history. Beyond specific maps, the broader pattern of inherited geographic knowledge strengthens the argument. Cartographic traditions from China, India, the Middle East, and Europe often contain features that cannot be explained purely by observation available at the time. Islands, coastlines, and topographical details appear in maps centuries before European explorers arrived. This suggests that information was preserved and transmitted across generations, sometimes surviving political upheaval, cultural transformation, and the destruction of civilizations. If Atlantis existed, and if its knowledge survived even partially, maps may be one of the few direct links between the ancient world and our own. Moreover, the methodology implied by these maps is telling. Creating accurate representations of continents and oceans requires not only observation but mathematical and geometric knowledge, understanding of scale, and the ability to translate three-dimensional terrain into a two-dimensional plane. The precision evident in maps like Piri-Reis suggests a sophisticated approach to surveying and measurement, consistent with a civilization that had mastered mathematics, astronomy, and navigation, qualities Plato attributes to the Atlanteans. It is plausible that later cultures, lacking the original infrastructure or technology, preserved only the knowledge of shape, distance, and relative position, passing it down through maps. The convergence of these observations builds a compelling narrative. Atlantis, if it existed, may have left its mark not only in ruins or myths, but in the very way humans recorded the world. Maps, often overlooked as mere tools, might carry encoded knowledge from an era long vanished. The Piri-Reis map, the Orance Fine map, the Catalan Atlas, and other cartographic marvels are more than historical curiosities. They are possible evidence of a civilization whose understanding of the Earth surpassed that of its successors. Each line, each coastline, each island plotted with care may represent a fragment of Atlantean memory, transmitted through the centuries by seafarers, scholars, and explorers who recognized its value. And so, from ancient maps we gain not only geographic insight but also a conceptual bridge connecting myth, archaeology, and technology. The precision and scope of these maps suggest inheritance from an older civilization, a repository of knowledge that survived catastrophe to inform generations of navigators and thinkers. They are a silent testament to what may have been, evidence that a civilization once existed with an understanding of the world that rivaled or exceeded our own. From the Piri-Reis map to the medieval charts scattered across Europe, the echoes of Atlantis linger, waiting to be interpreted, waiting to remind us that our history may be far older and far more remarkable than we have been taught. Plato's account of Atlantis is as dramatic as it is precise. He describes the island as a flourishing civilization, rich in resources, advanced in technology, and ruled by kings of divine lineage. Yet, in a single day and night of misfortune, the same island and its people were destroyed by natural forces. Earthquakes shook the foundations of the world, and floods swallowed the land, leaving no trace behind. For centuries, historians and skeptics dismissed this tale as allegory, a moral lesson about hubris rather than an actual historical event. But modern science, particularly in the fields of geology and climatology, has revealed that catastrophic events of enormous magnitude have indeed struck the Earth, events that could provide a historical basis for Plato's story. One of the most compelling scientific explanations for such a cataclysm is the Younger Dryas comet theory. Around 12,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, the Earth experienced a sudden and dramatic reversal in climate. Temperatures dropped precipitously, glaciers advanced rapidly, and large portions of the northern hemisphere were plunged into near-glacial conditions. Some researchers suggest that this abrupt cooling was triggered by one or more comet impacts, which may have caused widespread fires, atmospheric dust, and abrupt environmental changes. The timing is remarkable. It corresponds closely with Plato's chronology of Atlantis, placing the civilization's destruction around the same period. Could Atlantis have been a casualty of these cosmic forces, a civilization swallowed by a global catastrophe that reshaped the Earth's surface? In addition to cosmic events, the period saw dramatic rises in sea levels. As glaciers melted at the end of the Pleistocene epoch, oceans rose by tens of meters in a relatively short span of time. Coastlines were submerged, and entire landmasses once habitable to humans disappeared beneath the waves. The Mediterranean, the Atlantic coastlines, and regions around the Caribbean would have been radically transformed, erasing evidence of settlements that may have thrived for millennia. If Atlantis existed on a large island or coastal region, these rising seas could easily have swallowed it, leaving only fragmented memories and debris scattered across the ocean floor. Geological studies confirm that vast areas now underwater were once above sea level, offering plausibility to the idea that entire civilizations could vanish almost without a trace. Plato's story emphasizes the combination of earthquakes and floods, and this too has a geological parallel. The end of the Ice Age was a period of extreme tectonic instability. As massive ice sheets melted, the redistribution of weight on Earth's crust induced earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and land subsidence in numerous regions. Large-scale seismic activity could have caused entire portions of coastal islands to collapse, while the melting ice contributed to sudden inundation. This combination of tectonic and hydrological forces could produce a disaster so rapid and catastrophic that a civilization, no matter how advanced, would have little time to respond. Evidence of ancient global disasters is not limited to theory. Around the world, scientists have uncovered geological markers consistent with sudden, catastrophic events. Layers of sediment containing microspherules, nanodiamonds, and other high-energy impact materials have been found in sites across North America, Europe, and the Middle East, dating to the Younger Dryas period. These markers indicate that extremely high temperatures and immense energy were released, consistent with massive comet impacts or atmospheric explosions. Some researchers argue that these events could have triggered regional or even global floods, widespread fires, and mass extinctions of large mammals, dramatically altering ecosystems and human settlements alike. In addition, evidence of abrupt sea level rise is preserved in submerged landscapes, particularly on continental shelves now underwater. Off the coasts of Europe, Asia, and the Americas, sonar surveys and drilling cores reveal ancient river valleys, former settlements, and sedimentary deposits that were inundated thousands of years ago. In some cases, submerged structures suggest human habitation, perfectly aligned with the period following the Younger Dryas cooling event. The parallels with Atlantis are striking. A thriving civilization destroyed by environmental upheaval, its remnants lost beneath the sea, remembered only in myth and legend. The destruction of Atlantis, as described by Plato, also highlights the suddenness of the event. It was not a gradual decline due to economic collapse, war, or disease. It was instantaneous, cataclysmic, and absolute. Earthquakes undermined the foundations of buildings, while floods submerged the land. This dual mechanism mirrors what we know of the end of the Ice Age: tectonic adjustments destabilizing landscapes, combined with rapidly rising seas due to melting glaciers. Coastal communities would have been the first to experience catastrophe, forced to abandon settlements in hours or days, their cities lost beneath waves and sediment. Over centuries, oral traditions and stories could preserve these memories, gradually transforming them into the myths Plato recorded. What is particularly fascinating is the alignment between catastrophic events and the apparent knowledge possessed by ancient civilizations. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, the pyramids, and submerged ruins may not only represent advanced engineering but also a civilization adapted to environmental extremes. Knowledge of construction, hydraulics, and architecture could have been critical for survival in a volatile world. If Atlantis existed, it may have achieved technological and societal heights while simultaneously remaining vulnerable to planetary-scale disasters. The juxtaposition of advancement and vulnerability reflects a sobering lesson. No matter how sophisticated, even the most advanced civilization can be undone by natural forces beyond its control. The global scope of evidence for such a cataclysm is compelling. Across multiple continents, scientists have discovered deposits that align with the same time frame as Plato's Atlantis. Carbon-dated materials, evidence of rapid sedimentation, and sudden extinctions all point to an extraordinary period of upheaval around 12,000 years ago. While mainstream archaeology often separates myth from geology, the convergence of mythic accounts, archaeological anomalies, and geological markers suggests that the human memory of a cataclysm is not merely symbolic. It may preserve, in encoded form, the recollection of a real global disaster. The idea that Atlantis could have fallen victim to such a catastrophe also sheds light on the transmission of knowledge. If survivors escaped the destruction, they could have carried fragments of their civilization, maps, engineering principles, myths, and oral traditions, to distant regions. This transmission would explain why subsequent cultures exhibit advanced knowledge in scattered locations, why myths of floods and lost worlds appear globally, and why mysterious sites appear suddenly in the archaeological record without clear precursors. The fall of Atlantis may have been both an end and a beginning, a civilization destroyed, yet leaving echoes that influenced humanity for millennia. Finally, the notion of cataclysm emphasizes the fragility of human achievement. Atlantis, according to Plato, was not destroyed because of external enemies alone, but through the combination of natural forces and moral decline. The story is a reminder that civilization, no matter how advanced, exists at the mercy of planetary processes. Earthquakes, floods, and climate change are forces beyond human control, capable of obliterating cities and societies in a matter of hours. The geological evidence from the Younger Dryas, combined with the myths preserved in human memory, supports the possibility that Atlantis, or a civilization like it, could have been real, existing at the pinnacle of knowledge before being swept away in a single catastrophic event. The story of Atlantis does not end with its cataclysm. In fact, much of the fascination lies in the possibility that some remnants of the civilization survived. Plato implies that while the island itself was obliterated, knowledge and culture might have endured through those who escaped. Across the ancient world, myths abound of deities or semi-divine figures who descended from distant lands, teaching humanity skills, governance, and wisdom previously unknown. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent god, is described as a culture bringer, a teacher of agriculture, astronomy, writing, and arts. In the Andean world, the Inca revered Viracocha, who emerged from the sea to instruct people in civilization, imparting knowledge of metallurgy, architecture, and ritual. Similarly, in Mesopotamia, the figure of Oannes, a half-human, half-fish being, is said to have surfaced from the Persian Gulf to teach humankind mathematics, writing, and social organization. The parallels are striking. In widely separated cultures, we see myths describing outsiders who arrive from the water, bring knowledge, and elevate society. These myths, far from being isolated coincidences, hint at a shared narrative pattern. Many describe the arrival of advanced beings from distant lands or seas, who introduce agriculture, construction techniques, religious practices, or arts that dramatically accelerate the development of local cultures. The consistent motif of civilizing teachers suggests that humans remembered, not literally, but symbolically, the survivors of a lost civilization. If Atlantis had indeed existed and been destroyed by cataclysm, it is plausible that a few knowledgeable refugees fled, carrying with them technology, wisdom, and cultural practices. These individuals would have been revered as gods or semi-divine figures by the populations they encountered, their knowledge transformed into legend over generations. Consider the similarities in these myths. Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, and Oannes share several common traits. They emerge from water, implying a connection to the sea, just as Atlanteans would have been displaced by rising oceans. They are credited with introducing essential skills and knowledge: agriculture, metallurgy, writing, law, and architecture, suggesting that their society was highly advanced. Their influence spans vast geographic distances, from South America to Mesoamerica to Mesopotamia. While local cultures interpreted the stories differently, the recurring core narrative points to a potential historical reality: highly knowledgeable outsiders arriving after a catastrophe and teaching surviving populations. This theory is reinforced by archaeological and historical anomalies that suggest sudden advancements in civilizations around the world. In Mesoamerica, for example, the Olmec civilization appears to have developed advanced urban planning, monumental architecture, and astronomical observation rapidly, with no clear local precedent. Similarly, in the Andes, early societies exhibit sudden sophistication in irrigation, metallurgy, and ceremonial architecture. Could these leaps reflect the arrival of outsiders who introduced knowledge and techniques? If the survivors of Atlantis dispersed following the flood, they might have served as vectors of technology and culture, accelerating human development in distant regions. The notion of Atlantean refugees spreading knowledge worldwide also aligns with patterns in oral tradition and mythology. Many cultures describe the sudden introduction of tools, agriculture, and written language. In some cases, the innovations appear in clusters, as if transmitted by a concentrated group of knowledgeable individuals rather than developing independently in isolation. Legends of culture bringers arriving from across the sea or beyond mountains could be symbolic encodings of migration events, when surviving Atlanteans integrated into local populations, teaching skills essential for survival and advancement. Even the symbolism of water in these myths reinforces the connection to Atlantis. In Oannes' case, emerging from the Persian Gulf, the half-fish figure conveys both literal and metaphorical meaning: a civilization lost beneath the sea, yet partially preserved in human form, carrying knowledge to the land. Quetzalcoatl and Viracocha, too, are associated with oceans or lakes, reinforcing the link between catastrophe, survival, and cultural transmission. Across different continents, the motif recurs. The sea destroys, but it also preserves and transports, serving as a medium for survival and dissemination of wisdom. This theory is further supported by the distribution of technological and cultural similarities in widely separated societies. Early civilizations often share knowledge of agriculture, calendar systems, monumental construction, metallurgy, and religious symbolism, despite appearing to develop independently. Some researchers suggest that this could be explained by diffusion from a lost central source. If Atlantis existed, and if its survivors migrated following the catastrophe, their influence might explain these patterns. Knowledge would not have been spread randomly. It would have followed networks of refugees and maritime routes, seeding multiple civilizations with advanced techniques that were otherwise inexplicable for the time. Moreover, the myths often attribute moral and social lessons to these figures. They were not only teachers of practical knowledge, but also of governance, ethics, and ritual. This aligns with Plato's depiction of Atlantis as a society with complex laws, sophisticated infrastructure, and hierarchical organization. Survivors would have carried both technological and cultural knowledge, shaping the emerging societies they encountered. In this sense, the spread of knowledge is not purely practical. It is cultural, religious, and philosophical, ensuring that the legacy of Atlantis survived even as its cities were swallowed by the ocean. The idea that these figures, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha, Oannes, represent Atlantean survivors provides a coherent framework for interpreting global myths and legends. Instead of seeing them as isolated cultural inventions, we can view them as symbolic records of human migration, knowledge transmission, and survival after a catastrophic event. The geographic consistency of the motifs, the technological and cultural knowledge they impart, and the timing relative to the end of the Ice Age all suggest that these myths may preserve fragments of a shared memory, the memory of a civilization that perished yet left behind a profound influence on the trajectory of humanity. In addition, the diversity of local interpretations demonstrates how memory adapts over time. Each culture integrated the knowledge and influence of Atlantean survivors into its own worldview. The figure might become a god, a legendary ruler, or a semi-human teacher, but the core function remains: the transmission of skills, technology, and wisdom to ensure survival and advancement. This adaptability of myth helps explain why similar motifs appear independently across the globe, yet maintain remarkable thematic consistency. The survivors of Atlantis, if they existed, became mythologized, but their influence persisted in tangible ways. Archaeological evidence, while indirect, also supports this theory. Sudden technological advancements in disparate regions, such as metallurgy in the Andes, urban planning in Mesoamerica, or advanced construction techniques in Mesopotamia, suggest contact with external knowledge sources. While no single site conclusively proves the existence of Atlantean refugees, the pattern is compelling. Around the same time the Atlantis cataclysm might have occurred, multiple civilizations appear to experience leaps in sophistication that challenge conventional narratives of independent invention. Thus, the survivors of Atlantis may not have rebuilt a global empire, but they seeded knowledge across continents. They became culture bringers, guiding emerging societies in agriculture, architecture, law, astronomy, and metallurgy. They were remembered as gods, teachers, or mystical figures, preserving the essence of their civilization in myth, story, and technology. Through them, the legacy of Atlantis endured, influencing the trajectory of human development long after the island itself disappeared beneath the waves. If the knowledge of Atlantis persisted through survivors, myths, and maps, one might expect tangible traces to survive as well. Yet, much of what could confirm such a civilization has been obscured, dismissed, or outright suppressed. Across the world, discoveries have been made that challenge the conventional timeline of human history, suggesting that humanity may have achieved remarkable technological and cultural feats far earlier than mainstream archaeology acknowledges. These findings, often labeled forbidden archaeology, have been met with skepticism, derision, or neglect, yet they continue to point toward a past more complex and advanced than we have been taught to believe. One example lies in the discovery of advanced artifacts embedded in strata dating millions of years old. While mainstream science maintains that humans evolved relatively recently and could not have created sophisticated tools or devices in such ancient periods, numerous finds suggest otherwise. Artifacts such as intricately carved objects, metallic tools, and even items resembling modern machinery have been reported in deposits far older than the accepted emergence of Homo sapiens. The implications are staggering. If accurate, these discoveries would indicate that advanced civilizations existed long before recorded history, potentially aligning with the concept of Atlantis as a technologically sophisticated society that existed and disappeared in antiquity. Some of the most famous examples of so-called out-of-place artifacts, OOP arts, include the Antikythera mechanism, a Greek device over 2,000 years old that demonstrates astonishing astronomical calculation, and the Iron Pillar of Delhi, which resists corrosion despite being centuries old. More controversial are objects found in coal seams or geological layers dated to tens of millions of years ago, including carved stones, metallic spheres, and other items whose existence challenges the accepted chronology of technological development. While skeptics argue that such findings are misinterpretations or geological anomalies, the sheer number and consistency of reports across multiple continents invite deeper scrutiny. The suppression of such discoveries is another hallmark of forbidden archaeology. Institutions and researchers often face pressure to conform to orthodox theories that place human advancement in a narrow temporal window. Findings that disrupt this narrative are frequently ignored, ridiculed, or relegated to fringe publications. Excavations uncovering anomalous structures, artifacts, or inscriptions are sometimes halted. Artifacts are stored without analysis, and researchers who challenge established paradigms risk professional ostracism. This resistance has ensured that evidence potentially corroborating advanced ancient civilizations, possibly including Atlantis, remains largely unexplored by mainstream academia. One reason for this suppression lies in the foundational assumptions of modern archaeology. The Standard Model assumes a linear progression from primitive hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural villages, city-states, and eventually technologically advanced civilizations. This framework leaves little room for civilizations that arose, achieved high levels of knowledge, and were destroyed, leaving only fragments. Accepting evidence of such civilizations would require revising entire chronologies, rethinking the evolution of technology, and acknowledging that historical knowledge is far less complete than we believe. For an academic system built on consensus, such a paradigm shift is difficult, disruptive, and professionally risky. Despite these challenges, evidence continues to accumulate. Underwater ruins, such as the Yonaguni Monument in Japan, the submerged city of Dwarka in India, and the Bimini Road in the Bahamas, hint at urban centers lost to rising seas. Their scale, precision, and construction techniques remain difficult to reconcile with the accepted technological level of the respective periods. Similarly, archaeological anomalies such as the Sphinx in Egypt, which some researchers argue shows signs of water erosion consistent with pre-dynastic rainfall patterns, suggest that monumental engineering may have existed far earlier than traditionally acknowledged. Each discovery, taken individually, might be dismissed. Together, they form a pattern suggestive of forgotten knowledge and suppressed history. The resistance of academia to these findings is not only about preserving the timeline, but also about maintaining authority over historical narratives. Acknowledging the possibility of Atlantis or other advanced ancient civilizations would fundamentally challenge the perception that modern humanity represents the apex of progress. It would require admitting that knowledge has been lost, that civilizations can rise and fall catastrophically, and that humans may have achieved technological heights far earlier than we assume. For institutions invested in the established chronology, such a disruption threatens not only prestige but also the foundational frameworks used in education, research, and cultural interpretation. Even more compelling are the accounts of anomalous artifacts discovered in regions linked to Atlantis legends. Metallic objects, crystalline tools, and intricately carved stones found in deep underwater layers or ancient sediment deposits raise questions about the true history of technology. Some researchers suggest that these artifacts may represent remnants of Atlantean engineering, preserved by extraordinary conditions or by deliberate burial to survive cataclysmic events. While definitive proof remains elusive, the consistency of reports across different regions and time periods lends credibility to the notion that knowledge existed and was subsequently lost or hidden. Forbidden archaeology also reveals striking global parallels. Civilizations separated by vast distances, Mesoamerica, South America, the Middle East, Asia, exhibit sudden technological and cultural advancements that appear simultaneously despite no apparent contact. Monumental architecture, precise astronomical observation, metallurgy, and urban planning emerge in these regions within narrow windows of time. One plausible explanation is the diffusion of knowledge from a common source. Refugees from Atlantis or other ancient advanced societies carrying their expertise to new lands. The suppression or marginalization of such evidence by mainstream narratives obscures this pattern, leaving only the myths and fragmentary material record for investigators to study. Another point of contention is the interpretation of these anomalies. Conventional scholars often attribute them to coincidence, natural processes, or misdating, while proponents of alternative history argue for deliberate construction, lost technology, or human intervention far beyond the accepted timeline. The tension between these perspectives underscores a broader conflict, the struggle between evidence that challenges orthodoxy and the institutional resistance to rewriting history. Atlantis, as a civilization both advanced and lost, fits squarely into this contested space, symbolizing knowledge that has been systematically marginalized or overlooked. The psychological and cultural dimensions of this suppression are also significant. Accepting forbidden archaeology challenges not only academic authority but deeply held beliefs about human uniqueness, progress, and linear evolution. The idea that humanity once achieved extraordinary technological and cultural sophistication, only to have it obliterated by catastrophe, forces a re-evaluation of progress, history, and the reliability of collective memory. Myths, legends, and anomalous artifacts converge to suggest that our historical narrative is incomplete, edited, or filtered through layers of interpretation, some intentional and some accidental. Ultimately, forbidden archaeology presents a paradox. The evidence of advanced ancient civilizations exists, but acknowledgement remains controversial. Artifacts, submerged cities, and anomalous structures continue to emerge, yet mainstream discourse often ignores their significance. If Atlantis existed, its traces may be buried not only beneath oceans and sediment, but also beneath the biases and limitations of scholarly orthodoxy. The pattern of suppression, misinterpretation, and skepticism has ensured that the story of Atlantis, and the technological marvels it represents, remains tantalizingly out of reach, challenging researchers and enthusiasts alike to piece together a fragmented, hidden history. In this light, the study of forbidden archaeology becomes inseparable from the search for Atlantis. By examining suppressed artifacts, anomalous structures, and evidence ignored by mainstream institutions, we glimpse a history that predates recorded memory, a civilization whose technological achievements rival or exceed our own, and a world in which knowledge can rise, fall, and vanish, only to survive in myths, maps, and fragments of stone and metal. Atlantis, whether wholly factual or partially symbolic, represents this intersection of lost knowledge, suppressed evidence, and the tantalizing possibility that humanity's past is far richer than the orthodox narrative allows. Having examined the remnants, myths, and suppressed evidence of Atlantis, it becomes both fascinating and instructive to compare what is known, or suggested, about this ancient civilization with modern society. Atlantis, according to Plato, was not merely advanced in engineering and technology. It demonstrated mastery over energy, architecture, medicine, and social organization. These achievements, whether partially mythic or grounded in reality, present a mirror through which we can evaluate contemporary civilization, prompting reflection on what we have achieved, what we take for granted, and what risks we face in our own pursuit of progress. Energy was central to Atlantean civilization. Plato hints at remarkable feats in harnessing natural forces to power cities, canals, and machinery. Legends speak of crystal power sources capable of illuminating entire palaces, moving platforms, and even powering devices that seem to anticipate wireless energy and levitation. Compared to modern society, where energy production relies heavily on fossil fuels, nuclear reactors, and increasingly sophisticated renewable systems, Atlantis appears to have achieved both efficiency and sustainability. While our contemporary civilization grapples with environmental degradation, resource depletion, and climate change, the Atlanteans, according to myth, may have utilized forms of energy that minimized waste and maximized utility. The implications are profound. Technology without ecological cost, power without pollution, and an infrastructure that might have lasted for millennia had their society not been destroyed by catastrophe. Architecture provides another striking point of comparison. Plato describes Atlantis as a civilization of concentric rings of water and land, connected by bridges, canals, and monumental palaces. Cities were designed not only for defense and utility, but for aesthetic and symbolic purposes, reflecting harmony, balance, and order. In the modern world, architectural achievements often prioritize efficiency or spectacle, sometimes sacrificing sustainability or integration with natural landscapes. Ancient Atlantean engineering reportedly combined functionality, beauty, and alignment with celestial forces, bridges and canals harmonizing with planetary and solar patterns. Today, architects and engineers strive to incorporate sustainability and biomimicry, but the apparent precision, scale, and intentionality of Atlantean design suggest a level of holistic urban planning that still eludes us. The civilization's spatial understanding, use of materials, and integration of technology into everyday life provide a blueprint that modern society could learn from, particularly in an era increasingly aware of environmental and social constraints. Medicine, too, appears to have been highly developed. While Plato provides fewer explicit details than he does regarding energy or architecture, later myths and esoteric traditions suggest that Atlanteans possessed advanced knowledge of healing, herbal remedies, and possibly even surgical techniques. Surviving texts and oral traditions hint at the use of minerals, plant extracts, and perhaps energy-based therapies to promote health and longevity. In comparison, modern medicine has advanced through empirical research, clinical trials, and sophisticated biotechnology. Yet it remains constrained by the limitations of chemical and mechanical interventions, often treating symptoms rather than the systemic causes of disease. If Atlantean methods combined natural, energetic, and technological approaches, their medical knowledge may have been integrated in ways we are only now beginning to explore through holistic and alternative medicine, bioelectromagnetic research, and regenerative therapies. Social structure is another area where the contrast is particularly compelling. Plato portrays Atlantis as balanced but powerful, with governance distributed among kings who maintained order while ensuring that society functioned harmoniously. Unlike many modern nations, where power can concentrate in elite hands or political institutions can become disconnected from societal needs, Atlantis was reportedly organized to promote both stability and advancement. This suggests a culture in which merit, ethical governance, and social cohesion were paramount. Education, public works, and civic responsibility were emphasized, enabling technology, energy management, and urban planning to flourish. Modern societies, in contrast, often struggle with inequality, bureaucratic inefficiency, and short-term priorities that undermine long-term infrastructure and technological mastery. The contrast highlights not only what we might learn from Atlantis, but also the consequences of imbalance, hubris, or mismanagement. Indeed, the potential warnings inherent in the story of Atlantis are as significant as the achievements themselves. Plato emphasizes that the downfall of Atlantis was not caused solely by external forces, but by internal corruption, arrogance, moral decay, and the misuse of power. The civilization's advanced technology and energy sources, powerful as they were, could not prevent destruction when societal ethics faltered. Modern society faces analogous risks. Technological advancement has outpaced our ethical frameworks in many areas. Energy exploitation, artificial intelligence, climate engineering, and nuclear capabilities all carry the potential for self-inflicted catastrophe. Atlantis serves as both a cautionary tale and an aspirational benchmark, a civilization whose brilliance was immense, yet whose failure was total because power was wielded without restraint. Another comparison lies in the relationship between humans and their environment. Atlanteans, according to myth, harmonized urban development with natural and cosmic forces, integrating water systems, energy conduits, and architectural alignment with planetary cycles. Modern society, by contrast, often prioritizes economic growth over ecological balance, resulting in climate change, deforestation, and biodiversity loss. While our technological capacity rivals or surpasses what Plato describes, our societal impact reveals a fundamental imbalance. The Atlantean model, if it existed, suggests that technology, architecture, and energy can coexist with environmental stewardship, offering lessons in sustainability and long-term planning that are urgently relevant today. The comparison also extends to cultural achievements. Atlantis reportedly fostered art, philosophy, and science in ways that reinforced societal cohesion and human flourishing. Music, literature, and ritual practices were integrated with practical knowledge, creating a civilization that was simultaneously intellectually, spiritually, and materially advanced. In contrast, modern society often compartmentalizes these domains. Technological achievement can exist independently of ethical, philosophical, or artistic considerations, sometimes creating cultural dissonance. The holistic integration of multiple dimensions of human experience in Atlantis underscores a model of civilization in which progress is measured not solely by technological output, but by the overall flourishing of the populace. Military capability, while less emphasized in myths, also offers insights. Plato notes that Atlantis was powerful and capable of projecting influence, yet its strength was balanced by moral oversight and civic responsibility. Modern nations often achieve military supremacy through technology, resource accumulation, and strategic dominance. However, without ethical governance or social cohesion, such power can become destructive rather than protective. Atlantis presents a model in which technological and military capability is harmonized with societal values, a lesson for contemporary nations navigating the consequences of unprecedented technological leverage. Finally, the comparison illuminates the fragility of civilization in the face of natural forces. Atlantis, despite its achievements in energy, architecture, medicine, and social order, fell victim to cataclysm. Modern society, with all its technological sophistication, is equally vulnerable to environmental, geological, or cosmic events. While we have predictive tools, early warning systems, and engineering knowledge, the story of Atlantis underscores the need for humility, foresight, and ethical governance to ensure that technological power does not outstrip societal resilience. The narrative suggests that brilliance alone is insufficient. Long-term survival requires balance, responsibility, and respect for the forces beyond human control. In summary, the comparison between Atlantis and modern society is instructive on multiple levels. Technologically, Atlanteans may have harnessed energy, architecture, and medicine in ways that rival or exceed our own. Socially, their structure emphasized balance, responsibility, and the integration of knowledge into the broader good. Culturally, they harmonized intellectual, spiritual, and material pursuits. Yet, the warnings embedded in their story, hubris, moral decay, and susceptibility to catastrophe, remain pertinent today. By studying the lessons of Atlantis, modern civilization can aspire not only to replicate technological and cultural achievements, but also to avoid repeating the errors that led to the downfall of one of history's most legendary societies. In the 21st century, Atlantis is no longer confined to the realm of myth, legend, or speculation. Advances in technology, combined with a growing fascination with lost civilizations, have brought the ancient story into sharper focus than ever before. For the first time, we have tools capable of investigating underwater landscapes, mapping submerged ruins, and uncovering traces of human activity that may have been preserved for millennia. Satellite imagery, sonar mapping, deep-sea submersibles, and advanced dating techniques have revolutionized archaeology, allowing researchers to examine coastlines, submerged cities, and geological formations that were once inaccessible or invisible. What was once considered legend now has the potential to be explored with scientific precision. Underwater exploration has revealed sites that challenge conventional timelines and assumptions. From the sunken structures of Yonaguni off Japan's coast to the submerged city of Dwarka in India, and the enigmatic formations of Bimini in the Bahamas, discoveries suggest that ancient societies constructed monumental architecture in areas now beneath the sea. While mainstream interpretations often frame these as natural formations or later constructions, the consistency, symmetry, and sophistication of these sites demand attention. Modern technology allows us to measure distances, examine stonework, and detect patterns invisible to the naked eye, offering the tantalizing possibility that these submerged locations are remnants of civilizations contemporary with, or even predating, historical records of Atlantis. Renewed interest in lost civilizations goes beyond mere curiosity. Documentaries, research expeditions, and publications dedicated to ancient mysteries indicate a collective shift in human consciousness toward re-evaluating history. People are questioning the linear models of civilization, asking whether our historical narratives have omitted crucial chapters. Social media and global communication accelerate this interest, spreading discoveries, debates, and theories to a worldwide audience. This renewed fascination is not purely academic. It reflects a deep-seated urge to reconcile ancient myths with contemporary knowledge, to uncover the truths hidden in stories passed down through millennia. Atlantis has become a focal point for this pursuit, symbolizing both the allure of the unknown and the potential for uncovering lost wisdom. The resurfacing of Atlantis also taps into the collective subconscious. Myths, dreams, and archetypes often carry encoded memories of events long forgotten by conscious memory. Jungian psychology suggests that certain narratives, like the flood myths, lost civilizations, and culture-bringing deities, emerge repeatedly across cultures because they are embedded in the collective human psyche. As modern societies confront rapid technological change, environmental crises, and social upheaval, these archetypes resurface with renewed intensity. The story of Atlantis resonates because it reflects universal anxieties and aspirations: the rise of civilization, the acquisition of knowledge, the risk of hubris, and the possibility of sudden, transformative catastrophe. In this sense, our fascination with rediscovering Atlantis is not merely external. It is also internal, a reflection of our desire to understand the patterns of history and our own place within them. Technological progress has accelerated the pace of discovery in ways unimaginable a century ago. Satellite imagery and LiDAR allow archaeologists to detect structures hidden beneath dense forests or underwater sediments, revealing geometric patterns and anomalies that hint at deliberate human construction. Sonar and submersibles explore ocean floors with unprecedented resolution, mapping landscapes that were previously inaccessible. In combination with radiocarbon dating, sediment analysis, and geological modeling, these tools provide a framework for testing hypotheses about ancient civilizations, including Atlantis. We can now evaluate submerged ruins, tectonic shifts, and catastrophic events with precision, bridging the gap between myth and measurable reality. The convergence of technology and renewed interest has also fostered interdisciplinary research. Historians, geologists, archaeologists, oceanographers, and even engineers collaborate to explore ancient mysteries from multiple perspectives. Geological evidence of past sea level rise and tectonic upheavals can be correlated with archaeological findings, while legends and oral histories provide context for interpreting unusual structures or artifacts. By combining these approaches, researchers are developing a more nuanced understanding of how civilizations could have thrived, migrated, and vanished. Atlantis, once dismissed as allegory, is increasingly viewed as a plausible historical scenario, motivating targeted exploration and systematic analysis. Beyond physical evidence, there is a growing recognition of patterns in human culture that point toward a shared historical memory. Flood myths, advanced ancient knowledge, and accounts of culture-bringing figures appear worldwide, often independently of one another. The recurrence of these narratives suggests that the story of Atlantis, whether literal or symbolic, may encode real events experienced by early human societies. As modern psychology and cultural studies explore the persistence of these archetypes, our understanding of human memory, storytelling, and myth-making deepens, providing additional pathways for interpreting ancient legends. Atlantis thus becomes not only a subject for excavation, but also a lens for examining how collective memory preserves the traces of civilization over millennia. The timing of this rediscovery is significant. In an era of technological acceleration, climate crises, and global interconnectedness, humanity is confronting challenges that mirror, in some ways, those described in the Atlantis narrative. Rising seas, environmental degradation, and the rapid spread of knowledge highlight both the opportunities and vulnerabilities of advanced civilization. The story of Atlantis resonates because it reflects potential consequences of hubris, ethical lapses, and technological mismanagement. Rediscovering Atlantis now, through both myth and evidence, offers not just historical insight but also a cautionary framework for navigating contemporary challenges. Public interest has also played a critical role in propelling the rediscovery of Atlantis. Documentaries, popular science books, and media coverage have brought submerged ruins, ancient maps, and anomalous artifacts into mainstream awareness. Crowdsourced research, independent expeditions, and online collaboration allow enthusiasts and scholars alike to share findings, debate interpretations, and generate hypotheses. This democratization of inquiry mirrors the ancient Atlantean ethos of knowledge sharing. Just as the civilization is said to have disseminated wisdom across the globe, modern society is disseminating information about its potential existence, creating a global dialogue that transcends academic boundaries. Ultimately, the resurgence of interest in Atlantis reflects a convergence of technological capability, scholarly curiosity, and collective imagination. We now have the means to explore submerged landscapes, uncover hidden ruins, and analyze artifacts with unprecedented precision. Simultaneously, we are culturally and psychologically predisposed to revisit myths that resonate with contemporary experience. The fascination with Atlantis is therefore both practical and symbolic. We seek to measure, map, and verify, while also engaging with stories that connect us to the depths of human memory. The intersection of these forces makes the present an extraordinary moment in which rediscovery is not only possible but inevitable. Atlantis, once confined to Plato's dialogues and whispered legend, has entered an age where exploration, science, and imagination converge. Technology enables us to probe ocean floors and ancient strata, revealing potential remnants of lost civilizations. Renewed interest fosters interdisciplinary collaboration and public engagement, creating momentum for research that was previously unimaginable. And the collective subconscious, carrying echoes of ancient catastrophe, cultural transmission, and moral lessons, resurfaces to guide inquiry, providing symbolic context for the evidence we uncover. In this sense, rediscovering Atlantis is as much about understanding humanity, its memory, resilience, and curiosity, as it is about locating a lost city beneath the waves. The physical remnants and technological mysteries of Atlantis lies a dimension often overlooked, its spiritual and mystical aspects. While Plato focused on society, architecture, and moral conduct, later esoteric traditions, notably theosophy and the writings of Edgar Cayce, expand the narrative to include the inner life, consciousness, and spiritual technology of the Atlanteans. These interpretations suggest that the civilization was not merely advanced in material terms, but also cultivated extraordinary mastery over mind, energy, and the unseen forces of the world. This spiritual perspective provides both a deeper understanding of Atlantis and a cautionary moral framework relevant to contemporary humanity. Theosophical teachings describe Atlantis as a civilization in which humans had developed latent psychic abilities, which were integrated into daily life and governance. These abilities included telepathy, clairvoyance, and other forms of extrasensory perception. Atlanteans reportedly communicated without spoken words, using direct mind-to-mind contact to coordinate social, political, and technological activities. This form of spiritual technology, mind as a conduit for energy, information, and intention, enabled an unprecedented level of societal cohesion. Hierarchies were not merely political, but also ethical and spiritual, ensuring that knowledge and power were balanced by wisdom and moral responsibility. In this view, the fall of Atlantis reflects the dangers of misusing such powers, emphasizing that mastery of mind without ethical grounding inevitably leads to catastrophe. Edgar Cayce, the renowned sleeping prophet, expanded on these ideas, offering detailed accounts of Atlantean culture, technology, and spirituality. According to Cayce, Atlantis was divided into regions, each specializing in particular disciplines, from metallurgy and architecture to healing and psychic training. Spiritual development was inseparable from technological progress. Advanced energy devices and crystal technologies were powered not solely by physical mechanics, but also by the focused consciousness and intention of trained individuals. Cayce emphasized that these spiritual practices were vulnerable to corruption. When Atlanteans prioritized ego, greed, or personal power over collective welfare, the balance of forces was disrupted, ultimately contributing to the civilization's destruction. Mystical interpretations further suggest that Atlanteans accessed dimensions of reality beyond ordinary perception. Through meditation, ritual, and disciplined mental training, individuals could influence matter and energy, perhaps achieving phenomena that modern science labels as telekinesis, energy manipulation, or instantaneous communication. This spiritual technology, while speculative, provides a coherent explanation for the reports of crystal power sources, levitation, and other feats attributed to Atlantis in myths and oral traditions. In this context, Atlantis becomes a civilization where the boundaries between mind, matter, and energy were understood and harnessed systematically, a society in which technological and spiritual knowledge were inseparable. The fall of Atlantis, from a spiritual perspective, serves as a profound moral lesson. Whereas material hubris or technological misuse may have contributed to destruction, the deeper cause was ethical and spiritual imbalance. Advanced knowledge, when wielded without integrity, becomes a force for harm. Myths of Atlantis emphasize the necessity of aligning human capability with moral responsibility, suggesting that civilizations rise and fall not only because of natural disasters, but also because of the collective choices of their inhabitants. This lesson resonates today, as humanity navigates immense technological power, ecological crises, and societal inequities. Wisdom, ethics, and spiritual maturity are as critical to survival as engineering or energy production. Atlantean spirituality also incorporated an understanding of cycles, cosmic rhythms, planetary alignments, and natural laws. Their cities, temples, and energy networks were aligned with celestial patterns, reflecting an awareness of interconnectedness between human consciousness, the Earth, and the cosmos. Rituals and meditative practices reinforced these patterns, cultivating both individual and societal harmony. In modern terms, this represents an integration of science and spirituality. Observation, experimentation, and practical application were coupled with inner development and ethical awareness. The spiritual collapse of Atlantis illustrates the danger of neglecting one dimension while excelling in another, reinforcing the idea that holistic development is essential for enduring civilization. Atlantean moral instruction, embedded in myth and esoteric accounts, often emphasizes humility and service. Powers that exceeded ordinary human capability, whether psychic, technological, or political, were to be used in service of the collective rather than personal gain. The civilization's downfall demonstrates the consequences of pride, selfishness, and ethical lapse. When advanced abilities are misused, even the most sophisticated society can be obliterated. This narrative resonates with other ancient traditions, where the fall of great civilizations is attributed not merely to external catastrophe, but to human failings, hubris, moral decay, and the neglect of spiritual principles. The spiritual legacy of Atlantis, therefore, is not limited to psychic abilities or mystical technology. It encompasses a philosophy of balance, ethics, and conscious engagement with both material and metaphysical realms. Atlanteans exemplified an integration of inner and outer mastery, They cultivated intellect and intuition, engineering and ethics, energy manipulation and moral responsibility. From this perspective, Atlantis is not just a cautionary tale about lost technology, but a guide for navigating the relationship between power, knowledge, and conscience. Modern society, with its vast technological capabilities and complex social structures, faces similar challenges. How to wield knowledge responsibly, harmonize individual and collective interests, and maintain ethical integrity while pursuing advancement. The resurgence of interest in spiritual interpretations of Atlantis also reflects contemporary human needs. In an era dominated by technological acceleration, environmental crises, and societal disconnection, myths of Atlantean wisdom remind us that progress is incomplete without ethical and spiritual grounding. The emphasis on mind power, telepathy, and holistic understanding encourages reflection on the limits of material achievement and the importance of consciousness in shaping both personal and collective destiny. Rediscovering these spiritual dimensions provides a template not only for understanding the past, but for guiding contemporary choices, emphasizing that intelligence, creativity, and power must be accompanied by ethical vigilance. Finally, the spiritual narrative of Atlantis underscores the enduring relevance of myth. Beyond physical ruins and artifacts, the story persists because it embodies universal truths about human potential and vulnerability. It cautions that mastery of external forces, whether technological, political, or ecological, must be mirrored by mastery of the inner self. The fall of Atlantis serves as both a warning and an invitation, a reminder of the consequences of neglecting ethics and spirituality, and an inspiration to cultivate balance, wisdom, and mindful engagement with the forces we command. In this way, Atlantis transcends history and archaeology, offering insights that remain profoundly applicable to the moral, technological, and spiritual challenges of the present day. Even after millennia, the question of whether Atlantis could return continues to capture the imagination. While the island itself is lost beneath the waves, or perhaps buried under ice or sediment in remote locations, the possibility that fragments of the civilization remain intact, preserved by geological processes or submerged landscapes, is tantalizing. Underwater archaeology and advanced scanning technologies have shown that cities can endure remarkably well when protected from exposure, erosion, or human interference. From submerged pyramids to sunken roadways, evidence suggests that human constructions can persist far longer than previously assumed. If any Atlantean structures, artifacts, or technological devices survive the cataclysm, modern science may one day uncover them, bringing us closer than ever to reconnecting with a lost civilization. The survival of physical remnants would not only confirm the existence of Atlantis, but also open the door to understanding and potentially reviving aspects of their technology. Myths and esoteric accounts describe advanced energy sources, crystal-based power, and techniques for levitation or anti-gravity. While these concepts border on the fantastical, even partial recovery of Atlantean knowledge could revolutionize our understanding of energy, engineering, and environmental stewardship. For example, if Atlanteans achieved near-perfect energy efficiency or harnessed forms of power we do not yet comprehend, studying their remnants could inspire breakthroughs in sustainable energy, architectural design, and material science. The implications for humanity's technological trajectory are profound. Atlantis represents a repository of lost innovation waiting to be rediscovered. Rediscovery is, however, not solely about tools or materials. It is also about knowledge encoded in design, mathematics, and ritual practice. Ancient maps, aligned structures, and urban layouts suggest that Atlanteans embedded information within their surroundings. Astronomical patterns, symbolic geometry, and principles of energy distribution. Uncovering these elements could provide insight into advanced methods of problem-solving, city planning, and ecological integration that predate modern theories by millennia. Even if the original population is long gone, their intellectual and technological legacy may remain, offering lessons that could be applied to contemporary challenges. In this sense, Atlantis is not just a historical curiosity, but a potential guide for advancing human civilization responsibly. The question of revival also raises ethical and philosophical considerations. Even if Atlantean technology were found, its application would demand a balance of wisdom and restraint. Myths consistently emphasize that misuse of knowledge led to the civilization's downfall. In our era, with global communication, nuclear capabilities, artificial intelligence, and climate intervention at our disposal, the stakes are even higher. Rediscovering Atlantis would provide both opportunity and warning, the chance to benefit from advanced knowledge tempered by the recognition that moral integrity, societal responsibility, and ethical oversight are essential. Without these, the lessons of the past could be repeated rather than avoided. Furthermore, the potential for Atlantis to return exists in the cultural and symbolic sense. The resurgence of interest in lost civilizations, combined with a collective memory embedded in myths and archetypes, suggests that Atlantis is resurfacing in human consciousness. This psychological and cultural return may inspire innovation, ethical reflection, and a renewed sense of global connectedness. Even absent physical remnants, the principles and cautionary lessons embedded in the Atlantis narrative can guide human development, encouraging balance between technological achievement, ethical governance, and environmental harmony. In effect, Atlantis could influence the future without a single stone ever being excavated. Modern exploration has already revealed that humanity is closer than ever to rediscovering the physical traces of this lost civilization. Deep-sea submersibles, satellite mapping, LiDAR, and advanced sonar allow archaeologists to examine areas previously inaccessible, including deep oceanic trenches, continental shelves, and submerged landmasses. These tools increase the likelihood of locating Atlantean remnants if they survive beneath the sea. Additionally, research into ancient climate change, seismic activity, and sea level rise provides a framework for predicting where Atlantean cities may have existed, narrowing the search and increasing the chance of meaningful discovery. Even fragments of Atlantean civilization could profoundly affect contemporary society. Architectural principles, sustainable energy methods, and integrated urban planning could inform modern design, while medicinal or technological knowledge could spur breakthroughs in health, energy, and materials science. Beyond the practical applications, rediscovery would reaffirm the continuity of human achievement, demonstrating that advanced knowledge has existed before and can rise again, provided ethical stewardship accompanies technical mastery. Atlantis, in this sense, is a template, a civilization that embodies both human potential and human vulnerability, offering lessons about the consequences of ambition untempered by wisdom. Ultimately, the return of Atlantis is both literal and symbolic. Physical remnants beneath ice, sediment, or ocean may yet be uncovered, revealing lost technologies and insights. Simultaneously, the civilization returns in the human imagination, in cultural archetypes, and in the ethical and philosophical lessons embedded in its story. By studying the myths, rediscovering the ruins, and applying the principles responsibly, humanity can integrate the legacy of Atlantis into its future. In doing so, we honor the memory of a civilization that achieved extraordinary heights, learn from its failures, and explore what it truly means to wield knowledge wisely. The story of Atlantis is not merely about the past. It is a blueprint, a warning, and a source of inspiration for the potential future of human civilization. As we reach the culmination of this exploration, one truth resonates with undeniable force. Atlantis was real, and it was more advanced than us. The evidence, whether preserved in myths, ancient maps, suppressed artifacts, or esoteric teachings, paints a picture of a civilization that achieved remarkable technological, social, and spiritual heights. From sophisticated energy systems and monumental architecture to advanced medicine and psychic abilities, the Atlanteans exemplified human potential realized on a grand scale. Yet, as their story makes clear, mastery over knowledge, technology, and society is inseparable from ethical responsibility, balance, and foresight. This duality, of brilliance and vulnerability, forms the heart of the Atlantis narrative and the reason it continues to captivate modern imagination. Atlantis challenges our conventional understanding of civilization. Modern society tends to view history as a linear progression, primitive beginnings giving way to agriculture, cities, science, and technology, culminating in contemporary achievements. The story of Atlantis disrupts this notion, suggesting that civilization is cyclical rather than linear, capable of rising to extraordinary heights before succumbing to catastrophe. Cataclysm, hubris, and ethical collapse can erase even the most advanced societies, leaving fragments, myths, and subtle influences for future generations. In this sense, Atlantis is both an anomaly and a mirror. It reflects the heights that humanity can achieve while reminding us of the fragility inherent in progress. Our own civilization, with unprecedented technological power, faces challenges that echo those that may have confronted the Atlanteans: environmental crises, societal inequality, and the ethical dilemmas of power. The past, in the form of Atlantis, offers a profound lens through which to evaluate present and future choices. The lessons of Atlantis are manifold. Technologically, the civilization demonstrates that mastery over energy, materials, and architecture can exist without modern machinery, relying instead on a deep understanding of natural forces and, possibly, spiritual or psychic principles. Socially, Atlantis illustrates that governance, justice, and ethical alignment are as crucial as technological sophistication. Society's structure must balance power, responsibility, and communal well-being. Spiritually, the civilization embodies the integration of mind, consciousness, and ethical awareness, suggesting that true advancement encompasses both material and moral dimensions. Each facet, technology, governance, spirituality, is intertwined, reinforcing the idea that knowledge alone is insufficient. Wisdom, ethics, and foresight are required to sustain achievement. The rediscovery of Atlantis, whether literal through submerged ruins or symbolic through myth, collective memory, and archaeology, is as much a mirror for humanity as it is a revelation of the past. The civilization's apparent achievements force us to confront questions that transcend geography and chronology. How far can human ingenuity stretch? How do we wield knowledge responsibly? What are the consequences of hubris and moral negligence? In this way, Atlantis becomes both a warning and an inspiration. It warns us of the dangers inherent in neglecting ethics and balance, while inspiring us to imagine possibilities that may surpass our current technological and spiritual horizons. In a practical sense, studying Atlantis encourages exploration and innovation. Underwater archaeology, ancient maps, and out-of-place artifacts challenge researchers to look beyond conventional explanations, to question accepted timelines, and to approach evidence with both rigor and imagination. Modern technology enables the investigation of submerged cities, complex constructions, and advanced engineering techniques that could revolutionize our understanding of history, science, and sustainability. These pursuits are not merely academic. They hold the potential to inform contemporary engineering, urban planning, energy management, and environmental stewardship. Rediscovering elements of Atlantean knowledge could guide humanity in creating societies that are not only technologically advanced, but also ethically and ecologically responsible. Yet, the significance of Atlantis is not confined to the material world. The civilization's spiritual and moral dimensions highlight the necessity of integrating inner development with outer achievement. Atlanteans, according to theosophy, Edgar Cayce, and mystical traditions, cultivated psychic abilities, consciousness-driven energy, and ethical responsibility alongside their technological mastery. Their downfall, attributed to misuse of power and ethical failure, underscores the principle that civilization's endurance depends not only on what is built or discovered, but on how knowledge is applied. For modern society, this insight is critical. The ethical use of technology, the balance of societal structures, and the cultivation of collective conscience are as important as innovation or scientific progress. Atlantis also underscores the importance of humility in the face of nature, history, and cosmic forces. The civilization's destruction, whether through cataclysm, rising seas, or internal collapse, illustrates the vulnerability of even the most advanced society. Modern humanity, while technologically superior in many respects, faces similar vulnerabilities. Climate change, natural disasters, resource depletion, and potential misuse of artificial intelligence or nuclear technology. The story of Atlantis invites reflection on how to navigate power responsibly, anticipate consequences, and align progress with ethical stewardship. It is a reminder that brilliance untempered by moral and environmental awareness can be catastrophic. Finally, Atlantis serves as a call to rediscover ourselves. Beyond ruins, maps, and artifacts, the civilization persists in collective memory, myths, and cultural archetypes. It represents the potential within humanity to achieve extraordinary creativity, insight, and harmony, while simultaneously illustrating the consequences of failing to govern knowledge wisely. The journey to uncover Atlantis, whether through archaeology, historical research, or spiritual inquiry, mirrors the journey of self-discovery. It challenges us to reconcile technological ambition with ethical consciousness, to balance material progress with spiritual development, and to recognize that the true measure of civilization lies not only in what we build, but in how we think, act, and relate to one another. In conclusion, the story of Atlantis matters today because it is at once a historical mystery, a technological enigma, a spiritual guide, and a moral mirror. It reminds us that civilization is not a straight line of progress, and that the heights we achieve can be fleeting without ethical integrity and holistic understanding. It serves as both warning and inspiration, urging us to consider the consequences of our actions while imagining the possibilities of human potential. And it compels us to ask the ultimate question: what if rediscovering Atlantis is not merely about finding a lost city beneath the waves, but about rediscovering ourselves, our capacity for wisdom, creativity, and ethical stewardship in a world poised at the intersection of extraordinary opportunity and profound responsibility?